Hello, this is George Kasenga coming to you from the University of Colorado in Denver in the United States, and I'm excited to be speaking with you today about breaking barriers, financing higher education in a global marketplace. I'm excited to have participants from all over the world for graduate and undergraduate study in the U.S., and I hope the information we have for you today is very helpful. There's an opportunity to ask questions throughout the presentation, and also the final presentation, including the active links that are embedded, will be available for you on the CU Denver profile later today. So with that being said, let's get started. So I'm moving over to the next slide. Looks like we just have, there we go. So the synopsis of the presentation today is to stress the idea that your academic record and having a well-written essay and a strong application alone may not be enough to get you to the United States to study. There are a lot of financial barriers that you may need to overcome. And so today we are going to talk about several different items. The first is the true cost of attendance. Studying in the United States does have more costs associated with it than just the tuition that you see online. Next, we're going to talk about institution financial aid packages and trying to help you understand those further. We're going to explore the different types of funding options there are. There are resources from your personal life, your family, that will help fund your education, but there are a lot of other places to look. We'll touch briefly on employment opportunities so that you understand what responsibilities you have and what limitations there are for international students who are studying in the United States. And then last, we're going to talk about deadlines and the instructions that you need to follow. So there is not a problem with getting all the materials entered in on time so that you are in fact eligible for those scholarships and the different awards that are out there. Okay. So the first section we're going to be talking about, again, is that true cost of attendance. For many students, international students in particular, you will observe that there is an out-of-state tuition cost as well as an in-state tuition cost. And so I want to help clarify what that means. The out-of-state, or the tuition that an international student is paying, is usually the actual cost of attending that university. For students, like students in Colorado, for instance, where we are located, students in Colorado will receive a grant from the state government. And so they have a different in-state tuition than our international students or our out-of-state students. It is important to ask when looking at different universities if international students pay the out-of-state tuition or if there is a special tuition for international students. Sometimes that's higher, sometimes it's just different, and you should get clarification about what that is before you start planning on attending that institution so you can understand the costs that you're going to incur. I skipped ahead one. So, what are some of the costs that you're likely to have? First, there will almost always be application fees, so you should be prepared for that. But also, in addition to the costs of the university, you're going to have costs for the different exams that you may need to take. So sometimes that's the TOEFL or it's an IELTS exam. Sometimes it's the SAT, it could be GRE, GMAT, all types of things. So as you're planning for your education abroad, remember that there are different associated costs. With your visa or with SEVIS, the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, there will be fees associated with that, and they can vary from student to student depending on your entry point into U.S. higher education, so that is worth asking about. Of course, there will be tuition and different fees on campus. There will be room and board costs, so room refers to on-campus accommodation. Board is, of course, referring to meal plans. You can have options to live on and off campus, so you can find ways to make this less expensive, but you should ask your college or university what their requirements are. Especially for first-year freshmen, it is a very common requirement that they live on campus, so the university can do everything it can to ensure student academic success. The costs of books and supplies can be substantial, and so if you raise all the money you need for the basic tuition but forget about books and supplies, you may find yourself having a hardship that you didn't expect. So you want to plan ahead with books and supplies. For international students, of course, you have to plan travel to the United States. And for most international students, there is the need to budget money to travel within the United States. Just arriving to Colorado, for instance, for our international students, has its travel costs, but many times students want to take a very short plane trip and visit New York City or Los Angeles or go to some of the national parks like the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone. And those can all be very exciting adventures, but you need to plan ahead for the financial cost. International students will often need to have health and medical insurance or to provide evidence that you have health and medical insurance, so you want to be prepared for those costs. And then there are just personal expenses, the incidentals, day-to-day social activities, going to the grocery store, getting supplies that you need. All of these are important factors when planning the actual true cost of attendance of U.S. higher education. So we're going to look briefly at financial aid packages. And in this process, I'm going to show you some ways to plan for and budget for all those true costs that I just outlined for you. I've put a lot of words on some of these slides so that you have this for future reference. I don't want anyone to miss out on information that I speak without it being written on the slide. So I don't want to read very much to you, but I want you to have this information available. It is often the case that there is only a minimal amount of financial aid available for international students, and in many cases it's reserved for graduate study. That doesn't mean there is no international scholarship for undergraduate students. In fact, there's quite a bit. But if we're talking in general terms, it's important to know that most of it you'll find at the graduate level. At the University of Colorado, Denver, we do have a lot of fellowships and grants for our graduate students, domestic and international. And at the undergraduate level, there are scholarships available, but they're much smaller. They are mostly focused in our business school. And then we also have some competitive merit-based scholarships. So we have 2 scholarships that are for about $5,000 per year to study at the University of Colorado in Denver. So some public institutions will charge international students an in-state tuition rather than charging out-of-state tuition and fees. That's something you have to ask about. There are ways to help you discount that overall cost of tuition, but they're not going to offer you those in most cases unless you ask about it. So some ways that you can help abbreviate or lessen the total amount of your higher education in the U.S., you could pursue completing your degree in a shorter time frame. So depending on your English language proficiency ability, you may take extra courses so that you finish a semester early. You may try to take classes over the summer months. Some students will look at going to a community college prior to arriving to a 4-year degree program at the undergraduate level as a way of saving some money. And it's important to learn more about the community college system in the United States because it is very different than what most international students expect community college to be. Again, like I said before, if you ask, some public institutions may charge international students an in-state tuition rather than out-of-state, but you do need to ask. And it is important to know that if you receive any kind of scholarship or financial aid in the U.S., as an international student, there may be some tax refunds or tax benefits or even tax penalties that you need to be aware of. And your universities, usually it's the immigration office, that team will be the ones who will be best equipped to answer those specific questions for you. And again, that will be very unique to you depending on your country and the program you're pursuing. So it is important to speak with a university professional and not rely just on the information that you may receive from friends, because everyone's situation is going to be very different. When we're talking about financial aid and the cost of living that you're going to experience, these are some of the important factors for you to think about. The first is, what is your geographic location and how does that impact the overall cost of living at your college or university? This can vary greatly and will probably not be what you expect. So you can look up some calculators online for cost of living and you can enter the city or state that you're going to be going to. But you can also speak with current students at the university or ask the International Admissions Office that you're working with. The type of housing that you pursue will impact your cost of living. You may live on or off campus, you might have a single room, you might have roommates. All of these are factors to take into account. If you find that you need to just save a little bit of money to make your higher education opportunity work, then getting another roommate may be a way to make the balance sheet work out for you. And so I do see we did receive a question, so I want to take a moment and look at that question and see if we can answer that now. This is a student who is looking for an undergraduate degree with a small budget, and is there any way of finding a loan or different types of aid? So over the course of this presentation, I'm going to touch on all of those topics, and then I'll come back to that to the end and try to address any specific answers or any specific elements of that didn't get hit on yet. Let's see, other ways to lessen the cost of your higher education in the United States include looking for advanced standing credit. So if it happens that you took the International Baccalaureate Diploma, or if you took AP courses, you may be able to get credit for those so that it takes you less time to graduate from your U.S. institution. As a graduate student, you may find that there are some capstone projects or courses that you've done in your final year of bachelor study that will apply to a graduate degree. In the U.S., this is almost never the case. But for an international student, because our different higher education systems work differently, there are times when coursework from the 5th year of study, or sometimes the 4th year of study, can be considered for advanced standing credit, and you will want to speak with whoever does the foreign credential evaluation for the university to get clarification on that. Or if you're going to be going through a third-party independent credential evaluation company, and some schools will require this, they will also indicate if there is an option for advanced standing credit for any of your coursework. Later in the presentation, I'm going to talk briefly about on-campus employment. That is an important topic because many international students want to receive that type of funding, and it can help make your expenses a little easier to deal with, but it's not as robust an option as it may be for some of our domestic students. The U.S. government always wants to make sure that academics and your coursework are your primary activity when you're on campus. So if you come to the U.S., they want to make sure you're studying, and that's your biggest focus, not just working on campus. I have two links here that we're not going to be able to open up during today's presentation, but as I indicated earlier, you will be able to download this presentation as a PDF from the CU Denver, University of Colorado Denver profile on College Week Live, and from that download you will be able to click on all of these links. The first is a sample budget that comes from NAFSA. That's an association of international educators in the United States. It's for professional staff members, but it does have some resources that I think are important to share with our international student population. And that budget is a nice tool to capture all of the different things I spoke about already today, so you can start planning. The second item is the U.S. federal government's shopping sheet. And so on my next slide, we're going to see a screen capture of that. If you just Google or if you use the internet and do a search for the U.S. federal government shopping sheet, this will come up. But this again is another type of budgeting tool that lists in all of these X's the types of expenses that you might experience, and then different opportunities for funds that you may receive. It is important to know that as an international student, you will not be eligible for any federal or state grant money. So in these examples where it talks about the federal Pell Grant, or there are different types of student loans, a Stafford loan for instance, you will not be eligible for those resources. So independent funding options. Where will you be able to find some money if you're not going to have those resources within your family or within your own personal network? Well, one of those ways is to look through different scholarships and grants and different loans that are available. So I mentioned that the Stafford loan, which is the most common federal government loan in the U.S., is not eligible for international students, but you will discover that some U.S.-based loans can be accessed by international students with a U.S. cosigner, and so we'll talk about that in a little bit about what that means. It should be noted that just like domestic students, for international students there is an expectation that you will first be using your own personal funds to pay for your higher education. Of course, we're all looking for those additional resources. We don't want to exhaust all of our savings. But understand that most schools, the advisors that you're working with, will ask you about that first. Some public and private universities will offer incentives for students to attend their university, different scholarships. Often they are competitive and they are merit-based, so they're going to be looking at the strength of your academic profile, but also the supplemental information that you include is important. That means the essays that you provide, the CV or resume that you include, any additional portfolios that you might include in your application. Those all can impact your opportunities to receive scholarships. Most institutional aid for international students, like I said before, is reserved for graduate study in the form of assistantships and fellowships. So at the University of Colorado, Denver, we are a comprehensive research university with a medical campus, and there is not one simple rule that applies to all 130 degree programs that we have on campus with regard to assistantships and fellowships. What you would need to do is talk to that department that you're interested in and see what rules and what guidelines and opportunities they have available for you. They will be different in our pharmacy program than they will in our MBA program. So that's important to know. You need to do a little bit of that research on your own ahead of time. And remember that if you ask, there are always opportunities at both private and public institutions to have the application fees waived, but you will want to indicate that you are a serious applicant. We understand that students are, especially international students, have a lot of financial burden to study in the United States, and even helping by waiving the application fee can be a way to make our schools more attractive and to make your burden a little easier. So here I have a link that's available for you. This again is through NAFSA. This one is typed out, so you will be able to access that anytime you want. There are some great resources there available to you for understanding costs of higher education in the United States. The budget tool will be there, and some of these bullet points that I'm talking about today come from some information available at this link. Okay, a few more items. I'd already touched on merit-based scholarships. Those are granted based on any special skills, talents, abilities, the academic profile of you as a student. We also have need-based scholarships, and these are rare for international students. It's not impossible, but what a university will do is they'll ask you for a lot of financial information so we can understand what your resources look like. And then some universities have their own resources where they will be able to give a scholarship to meet whatever need it is that you have demonstrated. This will be unique to each college and university in the United States. So as you're talking to different schools, you may find that one has this option and one does not, and you need to determine for you what is the best option. You may also find that some schools that cost a lot of money also have a lot of scholarship and financial aid available, whereas larger public state schools like the University of Colorado, Denver, were very affordable. So our tuition costs are less, but we have less scholarship and resource available. Once you do all of the math, you may find that going to a school that offers less scholarship still costs you less in the end. So that's an important thing for you to evaluate. Student loans that originate in the U.S. will almost always require a U.S. citizen as a co-signer. That means somebody from the U.S., a U.S. citizen, will take on the liability of that loan with you. There's always a fear for a bank or a lending agency that an international student will return to their home country and not pay back that loan. There may be loan options in your home country. This is becoming very common, increasingly around the world. But as I say here, be very careful with that. You will owe that money back. There's always often there's interest associated with loans, and you want to understand what you are signing up for before you put your signature on any contracts for a student loan. You do want to set realistic expectations and ask your potential university for some statistics about their scholarship options. What percentage of new students even receive a scholarship at that university? A lot of us like to think that everybody's receiving a scholarship, so we should have one too, but that is not often the case. So find out how many students receive a scholarship, and what is that average award? Does the average student receive $1,000, or maybe they receive $10,000? I don't know. You would have to contact your school, but that's important information to know to understand, is this school going to be a good fit for you? Also, how does this differ for U.S. students versus international students? You may find, and it's often the case, that the international students are eligible for less financial aid than the U.S. citizens. And that should be something that you expect, but it's important to ask about so you understand everything you can before making a final decision for a university. One of the things that can be very difficult is finding the college or university that you think has the right academic program, and that's what should be driving your search, is looking for the school that has the right fit for you so that you have the good academic fit, there's a good reputation for the university, and that it's going to help propel you in whatever direction you want to go, whether you plan on doing research, more academia, whether you're looking for good career opportunities. And so finding out that the financial piece can be can be an obstacle that you have to overcome can be very frustrating, but you want to continue the search. We have resources for you. In this article that I've linked here, this is an example that's specific to sports scholarship. Many students in the U.S. and internationally have an impression that all the athletes on the campus have a full ride, they're going for free, and it's really not the case. And so this link will be available to you from our CU Denver profile on College Week Live, and you could read more. You could also do an internet search for that exact title, 7 Things You Need to Know About Sports Scholarships, and you can find an article that has some very interesting information for you. Again, these are some links that I'm not going to be able to click on each one of them here for you right now, but these are some great resources for you to use as you start your search for scholarships and grants and the free money that you're looking for to fund your higher education in the United States. So a broad plan of scholarship resources is a very good online community of international students studying in the U.S. This is a place where you can find students from your own country already studying here and learn how they were able to fund their education. I find that to be one of the most valuable ways for students to learn and get this information that they're looking for. College Board is a very big website. There are a lot of resources there, so you may want to set aside some time, maybe 20 minutes, a half an hour, when you're going to visit that website to find what you're looking for. FastWeb is great. You will discover there that you can put in a lot of characteristics unique to you. So you could say male or female, the country you're from, the degree that you're pursuing. All these different characteristics can help narrow down scholarships that will have a higher chance of you receiving them. Of course, we have a couple more here: international education, financial aid, and then international scholarships as a database for international students. So I want you to have these resources so you can explore them. A few more here: Mobility International, the UN, United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, has a great database of scholarships for international students, so do take time to explore that. And you will find that there are resources for you, whether you are a graduate student or an undergraduate student. There's less available for studying English as a second language in advance of your university study, but certainly for the degree programs, that's going to be available there for you. Let's see, this last bullet here is specific for students interested from Latin America or the Caribbean. So I wanted to make sure you knew that this was there because I have learned from my experience working with students that they have received resources through this. And so if you're from Latin America or the Caribbean, please explore this opportunity here, this bottom link. And then another handful of links. And I'm not going to go into detail about each of these. They will be available for you to explore through the presentation. But again, these are places where you can connect with people who have already received scholarships from your country, and you can ask how they funded their education, or there are going to be lists of resources for you to contact. I have found that if you contact your U.S. Embassy or consulate in the U.S. and ask them if they have any resources for you or can connect you with some students from your country, more often than not, they will be able to provide you some information about how other students have funded their education. And that has been one of the most repeated things I've heard from international students when they've talked about where they discovered, that final scholarship that worked out for them. So these are all available for you as well. Okay, employment opportunities. A lot of international students, like domestic students, the U.S. citizens, want to find a job on campus. When you're looking for a job on campus, I always advocate to try and find a position that is somehow married to your academic interests. That doesn't always work out, but if you're a sociology major and can get a job in the sociology department, that's always a very good fit. For some students, though, for instance, I run an international admissions office. We have several students with all types of academic backgrounds that work for us, but they're great for connecting with interested students, and so they're able to find a passion because they had loved their experience at CU Denver so much that they're happy to work with our office to help other students discover what CU Denver has to offer. The rules concerning non-immigrant student employment are very complex. So again, it's important for you to speak with a professional staff member with the university or college that you're looking at, and not to rely on the information that you receive from friends or past students, because your situation is going to be unique to you, and we don't want a problem with employment to result in something complicating your education. It's important to know that most student jobs will provide about enough income to cover your personal expenses. So in the U.S., in most cases, you're allowed to work about 20 hours per week as an international student, so that the primary focus of your time still rests with completing your academic study. I also have a little information here about tax credit information. Many financial resources available to international students are deemed taxable, so you may have to deal with filing taxes in the U.S., and your college or university will give you assistance with this. But if your home country maintains a tax treaty with the U.S., you may qualify for a full refund of any taxes that you need to pay, and so you're going to want to know about that early on in your career as a student or while working on campus. One of the final sections we're going to talk about today are deadlines and instructions. And I do want to remind you before I get into this that if you have any questions or if you want to follow up, you can type in a question and I will respond to it. And of course, you can always contact us at the University of Colorado Denver and we'll be happy to follow up with you. So deadlines and instructions. This is the most common way that a student misses out on an opportunity. They either didn't read all of the instructions before they started an application, or they missed a deadline. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to take the time to read a full scholarship or grant application thoroughly in advance of starting the process, and making sure that you have enough time to complete a good, solid application in advance. If you have any questions, if there's anything that's unclear to you about the instructions, it is okay to ask. Sometimes we hear from students that they felt that it would look negatively upon them if they called and asked for clarification, but in fact it's the opposite. We are looking for students who can submit a good, strong application, and if you have some questions, then please do call us and we will be happy to address those with you. And that's true for any scholarship or application that you find, whether it's with the University of Colorado Denver or with another school. Feel free to contact them in advance to get clarification. You may want, I've already talked about contacting your embassy to see how other students have received funding. I do think that's an important option. But most U.S. colleges and universities, like the University of Colorado Denver, will have a scholarship resource office. It might be part of the financial aid office, but you can visit our website and you can explore all the scholarships and grants for graduate and undergraduate students, whether you're domestic or international, and you can sort them by graduate and undergraduate. You can sort them by which school or college or even what major you are interested in. And of course, if there's some special category, some special characteristic, then you're going to be able to see all those filters and find the group of scholarships that you are eligible for on the campus. Okay. One of the primary resources that I used when doing some of the research for today was through NAFSA. This is the Association of International Educators. At this link, you can go and see an even more comprehensive exploration of financing higher education in the U.S. This isn't the only resource, but I do a lot of work with NAFSA, and I really support and believe in the information they have available for students. But of course, I worked with all the professional staff at the University of Colorado Denver. And if you do have follow-up questions, we are here and available for you. Some final thoughts that I have for you about breaking those barriers that might prevent you from funding your higher education in the United States. The first is that studying abroad is a life-changing experience for everyone, and it is worth the extra effort you may have to put in to find those additional resources. It can be a challenge, it can be very frustrating, but it is well worth the effort. Do not be afraid to ask your future college or university about funding possibilities. Most schools in the U.S. will be what we call read blind. We're going to make admission decisions based on your academic record. We're not looking at your financial situation in advance of making an admission decision. So it's okay to ask those questions. It's not going to penalize your application process. And again, always find other students from your country who've studied in the U.S. You can do this through social networks. That's Facebook and Twitter and all the international country-specific social networks that are out there. But also through alumni networks and friends and families, the embassies, consulates, and ask how they funded their education. There are more resources and opportunities out there than you may realize, but you have to do some work to discover them. And so, of course, I want to thank you for participating in today's presentation and listening, but I want to let you know that I'm available for any questions. And so, the question box is open. We do again have one question about looking for an undergraduate degree that's going to be inexpensive, and are there any loans or is there financial aid? I feel like I touched on quite a bit of that, but if there are any other questions out there, I want to be available for you, so I'm here and happy to take those questions now. So I don't see any questions coming in just yet. Let's see. When you are looking for an undergraduate degree that's going to be a low cost, one way to approach that is you can explore attending a community college first. Let's see. Oh, since I was not using the technology correctly, so I was able to get that fixed. Okay. So, some of the other questions that have come in. Oh, so someone did ask, yes, a fire truck did go by at one point, so I apologize for the noise associated with that. This will be a recorded presentation, so you will be able to visit College Week Live at another time and see the content of the presentation again. And if you visit the CU Denver profile, we will have it available for you to download, so the links will be active. When we're talking about education loans, what is important to know about education loans is to stress again that if they're coming from the United States, they will need a U.S. cosigner. It is not appropriate, meaning it is not a good idea to ask the college or university representative if they will be your cosigner. They are not allowed, and it's really not what should happen. You should be looking for a family or a friend or someone who already lives in the U.S. to serve as that cosigner. Within your own country, you can start looking at your local banks, or you can ask your government if there are resources available for student loans. In most cases, those are being coordinated at a government level. I was asked the question, can I work full or part-time to pay for school because my family can't help me and there's only one way for me to pay, and maybe that would be paying after school. So yes, you can work on campus, but it's usually not enough to pay for the full tuition as an international student. You're going to be limited to about 20 hours per week. There is one school in the United States recently that created the option. I think that it's in Oregon, but I don't want to say that. I don't know the name exactly. That has recently created the option of paying for your tuition after you graduate. That is new. That's the only school I know of is doing that is in Oregon. But you'd want to make sure it's a good academic fit for you before you try to pursue that option. Does the University of Colorado Denver have pre-med courses, and does it have a medical school? So that is a great question, and of course CU Denver does have pre-medicine. We have a medical campus. CU Denver is located, of course, in Denver, Colorado. We are a comprehensive Research One university. We're ranked in the top 200 national schools and in the top 110 public schools in the United States. We've also been ranked as being the top 50 research universities in the U.S. by a group called the Center for Measuring University Performance. So yes, we do have medical school, and we have the pre-med program. Another question that came in was, does writing about one's economic condition in an essay affect the chance of getting financial aid? Is it taken into consideration, and is it okay to mention that in the statement of purpose? So yes, I do believe that it is okay. When you are talking to your college or university, you should write the essays that they ask for. So if they give you a specific prompt, maybe they want you to address something related to the major or the type of research you want to do, you need to answer that question in the essay. But you can also include a personal statement. And that is a place where you can include information on an important topic that the college and university doesn't know to ask about. So in this case, if you're talking about your economic condition, absolutely you can provide that information, but understand it may not affect the admission decision, but it's important information for them to have as they are deciding the allocation of scholarships and financial aid. You may also learn that at different schools they have different forms that they want you to complete if you're experiencing financial hardship. And that's the wording you should use when you're talking to the university. If you say that you have financial hardship, they will recognize the situation you're in more quickly and be able to direct you to the resources they have on campus. Okay, so now we have a couple more questions. Again, can I get a copy of the webinar? Yes, it will be available through College Week Live and on the CU Denver profile. Another student says, I want a scholarship for a U.S. college to complete a graduate degree. I've been attending via distance, but I'm thinking it may benefit me to come there. Can I work while I study to help meet housing needs? So, of course, like I said before, working on campus is an option, but depending on the pay rate that you have and how many hours a week you're able to work, that will affect how much it will help with those housing costs. And it is often a challenge that you won't discover that information until after you arrive to campus. Some colleges and universities will do student employment placement in advance of you arriving, but some will not, and so you want to ask about that. Okay, working through these. Okay, got that. And of course, congratulations to Lisa regarding receiving that scholarship. So what are the SAT requirements for scholarships in general? That's a great question. So for international undergraduate students, you want to speak with your college or university to see if they require SAT. There's a big debate in higher education in the U.S. about SAT right now, and there are some very strong, very good schools that no longer require SAT for all students, or sometimes just not for international students. At CU Denver, we do not require an SAT unless you are an undergraduate student going into engineering. And that is based on the success our students have had in the past and how much of an indicator that SAT was. You will discover that the requirement for an SAT score as it relates to scholarship is going to vary from school to school. So I can't just tell you a number that you need a minimum score or a maximum score for scholarship. It's going to change from school to school, and you can call them and ask them that information, and most schools will give it to you. You can also look on their website. You can look at the profile of the incoming class. If you can find that incoming class profile, you'll have a good sense of what the average SAT score was, and that will tell you what you should need if you want to receive scholarship from that school. Okay, moving forward. What kind of academic records are important, like paper projects or what? Okay, so I can answer that. When we're looking at an academic an application, the first and most important thing is to include all of the pieces that we asked for. So if our application list says we need your original transcript from high school, a college transcript, we need a letter of recommendation, an application fee, and an essay that talks about your major. You absolutely have to include that information. But then you can include what we call supplemental information, and it can be added in addition to your transcript and for to your application materials. And that's going to vary from individual to individual. Some students will include an essay that they wrote that they won they won an award for at home. Some will include certificates of accomplishment for different clubs or activities that they've been a part of. That varies from each individual. Another student asked, do we have a conditional application? Oh, so that's a great question. It's CU Denver. We do offer conditional admission. So for students at the undergraduate level, all of our programs have conditional admission, which means the student has all of the academic requirements satisfied with the exception of English language proficiency. Students can come to our ESL Academy. The English is a Second Language Academy at CU Denver, and if they finish our academy, they will then have if they finish the academy, they no longer need to take the TOEFL or the IELTS to enter CU Denver, and so that's a very attractive option for a lot of students. Some schools will and some schools will not offer conditional admission. You want to ask. For our graduate programs at CU Denver, only I'd say about 20% of our graduate programs will offer conditional admission. And there are a lot of reasons why some schools do and some schools don't, and you should feel free to contact your program and ask about that. Another question is a high age a problem for application and financial aid? Oh, so that's a good question. And it is not. The international students who come to us are of all ages. Typically a student is 18 or older when they start as a first-time freshman. But if you are in your 20s or 30s or even 40s or older and you want to apply for a program, that is not going to be seen negatively with your application. For some students, that professional life, that professional work experience actually helps in the application review, especially if the academic performance was not very strong. If a student had a medium or just an average GPA, but then had 10 or 15 years of work professional experience, the admissions committee is going to look favorably upon that. Okay, let's see. Do I need to find academic staff who can supervise my subject before application and more things? So, if I understand the question correctly, when you arrive to campus for most universities, including CU Denver, you will have academic advisors who will be able to discuss with you the courses you need to take and what order they should be taken in so that you graduate on time and with good marks. If you want to ask somebody about your application process, so for instance, you could call the International Admissions Office and you could ask any questions you have about the process. We're very happy to help you. We want to be the way you can access education in the U.S. and hopefully at CU Denver. So you can always call the admissions office and ask any questions you have. Let's see. Okay, another question. Does a Fulbright student, are they eligible to apply for other scholarships? So that's a great question. If you've received a Fulbright award, first, congratulations. That's a very impressive accomplishment. But that does not disqualify you from other awards on most college campuses. If your award covers full room and board and tuition, you may not need any other scholarship. That depends on the nature of your Fulbright award. But what the schools will call it is, we refer to it as stacking. So if our tuition was $5,000 and you received a scholarship for $1,000, and then another scholarship for $1,000, we're going to put those on top of each other, and now your final balance is only $3,000. So yes, you can have more than one scholarship. That's not a problem. So now the questions are really starting to come in, so I apologize. I'm trying to keep up with them. Are state universities a better bet to get grants and scholarships to international students than private schools, or is this not necessarily true? This is a very good question. You will find that on average, in general terms, that the larger public state university systems usually will have a lower tuition cost, and so then they have a lower financial aid scholarship awarding package, because the final amount that you need to pay is going to be less than a lot of the private schools. Private schools are going to be able to offer much more in terms of scholarship and financial aid, but you have to understand what is more important. Is it better to have a big scholarship, or is it better to be in a situation where you don't have to pay very much? And that's a nuanced level of understanding the financial aid process. But at the end, after all scholarship or no scholarship, whatever it is, what does the final bill look like? That's what you need to explore. And depending on the ranking of the school that you're looking at, or just the different tuition costs, this is going to vary a lot. I would also encourage you to not be limited by the ranking of a college or university. You can also look at individual programs. At CU Denver, for instance, we're ranked in the top 5 in the whole country for nursing, even though as a college or university we're in the top 100 or top 200 of all public and national universities. But if you're looking at nursing, we're in the top 5 in the country. So it's important to look at these different individual programs as you're exploring the school you want to attend. In what situations, this is another question, in what situation application fee may get waived? Sometimes it's as easy as asking. You might want to also include an email that says something like, I'm applying to 1, 2, 3 different schools, you might say which ones they are, and explain why you're very interested in the college and university that you're asking for a waiver from, and see if they're willing to grant it. The worst thing that can happen is they will say no. It's not going to hurt your application or penalize you in any way, so I think it is always worth asking for an application fee waiver. Let's see. Are there any special exams that need to be taken for financial aid? That's a great question. In the U.S., if you were a U.S. citizen, you will hear people talk about the FAFSA. That's the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. But as an international student, you are not eligible for that. So there are no special exams or special things that you need to do to apply for financial aid that apply to all schools. Now, your individual college or university that you apply to, they may ask you to fill out what they'll call a financial worksheet, and that is just to explore your financial background to determine need-based aid, meaning, if the cost of tuition is $10,000, and you only have $8,000, they can see in evidence with bank statements and other financial documents that you need $2,000, and then they would help you find that money. But on average, there is no large exam that you need to take. Okay, another question. What do you have to say about urban versus rural location and school size? I've heard that in urban areas, the expense of living is a lot higher than the bigger school is. The more students, you will get less attention if you need help with your studies. So urban versus rural, that becomes a personal choice. And I would say the first thing that needs to happen is look for a degree program that is a good fit for you, that's going to help you with whatever your long-term goals are. If you want to be a researcher or get into a specific career, the degree program should be the first choice. Then, urban and rural, for me, I like urban. I like being near a city. I like all the activities and resources that are available. Different cities in the United States will have very different costs of living. Denver, where I am, I find to be a very affordable city. But if you're going to go to cities in California or New York, or the popular cities even in Texas, those become much more expensive because they're the most popular locations. So that becomes an individual decision depending on your resources. At a school like CU Denver, we are a medium-sized university. So we have about 18,000 students, but we also have about 10,000 staff, faculty, and employees. So we are set up to make sure that we have a classroom ratio that is still about 17 to 1. We're very focused on providing the advising that we need. So you want to talk to your school, look up their statistics, and talk to current students. I always find that to be the best. Because even in my job, I'm a director for international enrollment. Of course, I like my university a lot, and I want to tell you accurate, true information. But when you talk to a student, you get an experience that's more similar to your own. So it is worth asking them. There are a lot of big schools in the New England region that are located in rural areas. Isn't this a bit contradicting, or perhaps a mistake and these schools shouldn't be classified as big schools? That's a good question. Excuse me. So saying that a school is a big school only refers to the number of students that are enrolled. So a school can be in a rural area. For instance, I am familiar with a school in Pennsylvania that has tens of thousands of students, 40,000 students, but is located in a rural area. It's very far away from any big cities, 3 or 4 hours of driving. So those items are not mutually exclusive. You can be a big school and be in a rural area. And of course, there are plenty of small schools that are in urban areas. So you just look at the different options and see what you think is a good fit for you. Let's see, so I'm going to keep going. I selected a school for graduation and a master's in computer engineering. Am I supposed to show some funds in my bank, and how much should it be? So for any student who is going to be coming to the U.S., the immigration office is eventually going to ask you for financial information. The university is not allowed to issue visa documents, an I-20, a DS-2019, whatever the forms are, until they see that you have the financial resources to study at the university. We're not allowed to issue an I-20 for a student who it looks as though they will then arrive here and not be able to pay for their education. So for all students, eventually you will be asked for those financial documents. Another question. After graduating from USA, is there any option to stay there legally? This is a very individually specific question. There are different agreements with different countries that have something they call a 2-year home requirement, which means after completing a degree or a program, you would need to go back to the home country. That's not the case for all students. You could stay on a different type of visa. Some will switch to an employment visa. Others will pursue permanent residency. There are many, many options, and it's very unique to each individual case. You should talk with the immigration team at your university to learn what options are available for you. Let's see. So we have about a little less than 10 minutes left. Another question. How much is the maximum amount of money you can borrow to manage interest and when paid? So the maximum amount of money you can borrow is going to depend on who is lending you the money, how much they're willing to give you, and it's often related to the cost of the degree. So if your tuition is $20,000, you may be able to find people who will lend you all $20,000. You might also discover that if you're doing a bachelor's degree, they'll lend you less money, but then if you're pursuing a master's degree or a PhD or a terminal degree like being a doctor or a lawyer, those will lend themselves to larger lending opportunities. Let's see. Are SAT subject tests obligatory for scholarships? This is an example of looking at the guidelines and deadlines for the scholarship that you are applying for. That will be a unique characteristic of the different awards that you're looking at applying for. Some will require it, some will not. Some schools will require it and some will not. You'll just have to look at the requirements that they list for you. Another question, does the University of Colorado Denver have petroleum engineering? And so we do not have that at the University of Colorado Denver, but you may want to look at the Boulder campus. And there's also another school called the Colorado School of Mines that is very specialized in that area. If you've never looked at Colorado as an option, I'd really encourage you to explore it. We have over 300 days of sunny blue skies a year. The mountains get a lot of snow, but the city doesn't. It's an incredible place to live. Okay, so now I have one from Miles. Sorry, it looks like my questions weren't delivered, so here we go. Are state universities better to grant scholarships to international students than private schools, or is this not necessarily true? It is not necessarily true. It's going to be individual. And let's see. What you may find, though, is that the state schools, a lot of our resources are intended for U.S. citizens, and so you may have to look for scholarship resources through different channels. But if we're talking at the graduate level for assistantships and fellowships and things like that, usually there is not a discrimination between an international and a domestic student. At that point, it becomes very merit-based in nature. Also, does a Fulbright student eligible? Oh, okay, so I had answered that one. Okay, and I feel like I hit on those. Okay. So another question. I'd like to know, when demonstrating my ability to pay for U.S. education, do I have to have the total amount of tuition for all 4 years, or can I show for 1 year? Okay, that's a great question. At the time of receiving your immigration documents, and we have about 5 minutes left, you will need to show financial backings for usually 1 year of study and provide evidence for the reasonable expectation that you can pay for the other years. This is the general rule. If you are applying to a medical school, for instance, a program like that may ask for the full amount at the beginning. But for almost all undergraduate programs, most master's degree programs, providing evidence of the first year of tuition with a reasonable expectation for the other years is what they're going to be looking for. Okay, let's see. Is an 89 on the TOEFL considered a high average score? An 89 is certainly going to be a competitive score from most schools. At CU Denver, we would find that to be an acceptable score, but we would also be looking at your sub-scores. We want to make sure that, between writing and speaking and listening, that in each of those different areas, you also have a high competence level. So it's not just the average that we're interested in, it's also the different sub-scores. Okay. Let's see, I think we'll take 2 more questions. I want to apply for a graduate degree. How do I apply for the financial aid program and for a job on campus with my application? I've been told that if I ask for financial aid, that will be like a red flag in my application, especially with a low GPA. Is that true? And how does tuition installments, how does all of that work? Okay, great question. So it does make sense to wait until after you receive your admission to start asking about the jobs on campus and for all of the different specifics, because a lot of that information a lot of those opportunities are only for students who have been admitted and who have enrolled. So it's important to get over the hurdle of admission to the university before spending a lot of time and resources on asking about the assistantships. It's important to know if they're available and if you can qualify for them, but the actual process of applying for them should happen after you have received your admission to the university. I said earlier that it is okay to include a statement of purpose in your application that talks about the financial aid. And you probably have heard from people that it puts a red flag. And that would not happen at the University of Colorado, Denver, but it may happen at another school. So that may be a risk that you need to consider taking, because if you absolutely need those financial resources, it's not going to be helpful to get admitted and then surprise everybody with a financial need. So that becomes a decision that you need to make. And I think we have time for one more question. So let's see. And I'm opening it up. I apologize. Right here at the end, I'm having a little trouble with the technology. Okay. Well, so maybe that will end up being the last question. Maybe this one isn't going to open up for me. Okay, so here it is, the very last question. I'd like to know when demonstrating my ability to pay for U.S. education. Oh, no, I already hit that one. So I think we're in good shape. I think I've hit on most of the questions. However, it's possible that I missed one, and if I did, you can certainly contact me at the University of Colorado, Denver. I'm happy to do that for you. You can see our information is on the final slide. Again, my name is George Kasenga. I'm the Director for International Enrollment Management at CU Denver. And I really appreciate you being a part of our presentation today. And I look forward to you visiting our profile at College Week Live. And feel free to visit our website and contact us anytime. So thank you very much. Really appreciate you being here today.